The purpose of this video is to review some of the crucial points that were in the week 4 content of our course about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Specifically, I want to take this opportunity to walk through my take on the tables that I asked you to create in order to help you review and solidify your understanding of the content. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration are so crucial to life on Earth, whether it's aquatic life, like we see in the lake in this picture, or terrestrial life forms. There is no way that any of us would be here were it not for these two metabolic pathways. So the big picture idea here is that organisms require energy to survive. Every single one of your cells is a very busy place. There are molecules being made, molecules being broken down, things being moved into the cell, things being moved out of the cell. There's chemical work to be done. And your body and your cells and all cells need energy in order to get all of this work done. Autotrophs, or self-feeding organisms, are ones that make their own energy source through a process like photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, which we see here outlined in the purple box, is the base of the food chain in most ecosystems, whether they are aquatic ecosystems like lakes and ponds and our oceans, or terrestrial ecosystems, be they wetlands or forests or grasslands. And photosynthesis is a metabolic pathway in which carbon dioxide gas is taken out of the atmosphere and it is fixed into biological molecules, carbohydrates like glucose. And that food is what feeds most of the other organisms on the planet, including organisms called heterotrophs. So heterotrophs are organisms that must consume food. So food is their energy source. So this is really familiar to us. We're heterotrophs and we require at least 3 meals a day, some of us more. A really important point I want to make is that in either case, whether an organism is autotrophic, like all of the plants, or whether the organism is a heterotroph, like you and I, the energy available in the food is not immediately available to that organism. It needs to be converted into a really special energy-rich molecule called ATP. And the conversion of the energy in food into ATP is called aerobic respiration or cellular respiration. So I like to think about this like let's pretend that you're trying to do some work on your computer. You're sitting at your kitchen table and you have a pile of coal on your kitchen table. That coal is an energy source, kind of like these other biological molecules, carbohydrates, proteins. Those are energy sources. But the coal on the kitchen table isn't going to do you any good in terms of running your computer. If you're working on your computer, you need your computer to be plugged into an outlet in the wall. You need electricity. So just like the coal isn't going to run your computer, glucose and other carbohydrates aren't going to run your cells. The electricity, or the form of energy that your cells need, is ATP. And cellular respiration is the process where your cells convert the glucose that you consume, or in the case of autotrophs, that they make, into the form of energy that they need. ATP is their electricity. So I've got the formula for cellular respiration down here, and you can see it requires some kind of food source. It requires oxygen. This is called aerobic respiration. It produces carbon dioxide, water, and then, of course, it's also going to produce ATP. That's the whole reason why we need to do this. We need that ATP, that energy source. So now I want to walk you through the tables that I asked you to make this week, just to make sure you understand these processes and you understand really clearly what I was looking for here. So photosynthesis, we just looked at one formula showing the basic inputs, water, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and then the basic outputs, oxygen and glucose. And here we're actually looking at this 3-carbon carbohydrate instead of glucose. That's actually what your cells make. I think we talk about it in terms of glucose just to be able to compare it more directly with cellular respiration. But anyway, so we just looked at that as one chemical reaction with inputs on one side and outputs on the other. It's actually many, many chemical reactions, and they're broken up into 2 separate pathways called the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. Both of these sets of reactions take place inside the chloroplasts of plants, and specifically the light reactions occur on the membranes within the chloroplast, and those are called the thylakoid membranes. The light reactions, no surprises here, require light, so they require sunlight. They also require water. Plants are breaking up this water molecule, and that's where the oxygen comes from that they're emitting. They're converting this light energy into chemical forms of energy. They're making a little bit of ATP with it, and they're also taking some high energy electrons and they're loading them up into NADPH. I like to think of these NADPH and NADH as sort of like high energy electron taxis. So these molecules can be loaded up with high energy electrons and then they can move them somewhere else around the cell where they're needed. And in this case, they don't need to go far. So the ATP and the NADPH are crucial in running the Calvin cycle. And the Calvin cycle also takes place in the chloroplast. It takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast rather than the thylakoids. And the stroma is just sort of the goo that surrounds the thylakoid membranes within the chloroplast. And the Calvin cycle is kind of like the little carbohydrate building factory within the chloroplast. So the Calvin cycle is being run on ATP and NADPH from the light reactions. So here I put them here as inputs. And the raw materials, the raw building materials for making this carbohydrate is coming out of the atmosphere. It's the carbon dioxide that's coming out of the atmosphere. So Rubisco is locking down this CO2 and it's building up these large, energy-rich 3-carbon carbohydrates. And once again, this food is so important not only to the plant itself, but also to almost every other living organism on the planet. So this is the base of the food chain in most ecosystems on the planet. Okay, but as I said, that energy, those carbohydrates are not immediately available to the heterotrophs, nor are they immediately available to the autotrophs like the plants that generate them. Cellular respiration is necessary in order to convert that energy into ATP. And as you know, cellular respiration takes place in a bunch of different chemical reactions but recall that the energy in these carbohydrates is not immediately available to plants or to the heterotrophs that consume them. That energy must first be converted to ATP, and that's the goal of cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is a metabolic pathway that takes carbohydrates like glucose and simpler carbohydrates and it converts that energy that's locked up in those organic molecules into ATP, which is the form of energy cells need to function. So recall that cellular respiration is broken up into three separate sets of reactions called glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. So it starts in the cytosol of the cells with glycolysis. And glycolysis, it means the splitting of the sugar. So this is where glucose gets split in half. So glucose is a 6-carbon molecule. It gets cut into two 3-carbon molecules. As that happens, some of the high energy electrons in that glucose molecule are getting captured in an NADH molecule in an electron taxi. Some of that energy is getting locked up into molecules of ATP. When oxygen is present, that pyruvate is going to be further broken down in the mitochondria. Here you can see I put pyruvate as one of the inputs for the formation of acetyl-CoA and the Krebs cycle. In these two processes, this pyruvate is going to be completely broken down. All of the carbon molecules that are in these two pyruvate are going to leave the cell. They're going to be emitted into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. As these biological molecules are broken down, a lot of the energy is getting bound up in electron taxis. So we have 8 NADH molecules and then 2 FADH2 molecules being produced. This is another kind of electron taxi. And we also have a little bit of ATP being generated. But at this point in cellular respiration, we've only made 4 molecules of ATP. Most of it is generated on the inner mitochondrial membrane in oxidative phosphorylation. So that's where the cell cashes in on the energy that's in the electrons in these taxis and also in these taxis. So these molecules are going to move to the inner mitochondrial membrane, and they're going to donate their high energy electrons to an electron transport chain. Basically, the electron transport chain, when oxygen is present, is going to take these high energy electrons and it's going to slowly lower their energy level. And as it does it, it's going to capture that energy and use that energy to make ATP. So that's where we get 32 molecules of ATP. This is where the ATP payoff is in cellular respiration. This oxygen, it's going to be pulling the electrons, as I said, through what's called an electron transport chain. When those electrons end up on oxygen, that generates water. So that's where this water comes from. So again, as I said, the goal here is to get the energy into the right form, to make ATP. And cellular respiration, your cells and plant cells are able to break down a single glucose molecule and make about 36 molecules of ATP. So again, the purpose of this lecture was to review some of the crucial points about this week's content. I hope you're feeling more and more comfortable about the processes of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and I hope you appreciate the importance of these metabolic pathways to all organisms and ecosystems.